to be smashed, but to be touched with the hammer, as with a tuning fork. They are not to be destroyed, in other words, but sounded with a delicate, precise touch that reveals their hollowness and perhaps even retunes or plays a tune upon them. So Nietzsche's war against the eternal idols is a strangely non-violent practice, as he calls it, a form of recreation, a spot of sunshine, a leap sideways into the idleness of the psychologist. So this often, I think, overlooked by Nietzsche scholars is just the preface to Twilight of the Idols. And for me, I think it's fundamental reshaping of the whole notion of iconoclasm. Suppose the hammer, suppose the violence against the idol were one that would produce music out of it, or give it some kind of, expose some kind of hollowness within it. Rather different, I think, in fact. It's not destruction, but the best word we have is the one provided by Derrida, deconstruction of the idol. Now, I want to turn to the question of what do the visual arts, what have the visual arts done with the question of idolatry? So it presents a problem. Visual artists are, by professional necessity, involved in violating the first clause of the second commandment. If we turn to Vasari, the lives of the artists, we get an elaborate set of apologias for the visual arts. Vasari notes that God himself is a creator of images, architect of the universe, and a sculptor who breathes life into his fabricated creatures. Vasari waves off the inconvenient case of the golden calf and the massacre, I'm quoting him, of thousands of the false Israelites who had committed this idolatry by arguing in standard fashion the sin consisted in adoring idols and not in making them. Pretty stark evasion of the plain language of the second commandment, which says, "Thou shalt not make any graven images of anything." Now, there's one artist, I think, who comes very close to carrying out Nietzsche's inversion and transvaluation of the idolatry iconoclasm complex, and that's the English poet painter William Blake, who anticipates by almost a century the reversal of values contemplated in Twilight of the Idols. Blake famously inverts the moral valences of pious passive angels and energetic devils in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, 1793. And he consistently links the figure of the Old Testament lawgiver with his rationalist enlightenment offspring, in the figure he calls Urizen, or Urizen, depicted as a patriarchal figure dividing and measuring the universe, or as a reclusive hermit hiding his cave behind or in front of the twin tablets of the law, which he's already writing a commentary on. But like Nietzsche, I think Blake is not engaged in a simple reversal of a Manichaean opposition of good and evil, but a more subtle strategy rather like Nietzsche's notion of touching the idols with a hammer or tuning fork. His most compelling image of this process is a plate from his illuminated epic poem Milton, which shows the figure of Los, the kind of Apollonian artist, a sculptor, engaged in the ambiguous act of creating or destroying the patriarch Jehovah. We see Los as the artist, as sculptor. We can read this as an image of him molding the figure of Jehovah out of the mud of the riverbank, as if we were witnessing a kind of reversal of this primal scene of creation, in which we would see Adam creating God out of clay. Or on the other hand, we can read this as an iconoclastic act, with the artist pulling down the idolatrous statue of the Father God, the Son rebelling against the Father. So the image condenses the making and breaking of idols into one perfectly equivocal synthesis of creative activity, a visual counterpart to Nietzsche's acoustical tactic of hammering the idols without breaking them. And Blake's portrayal of a musical chorus on the horizon above the scene suggests that he too is sounding the idol, not with a tuning fork, but with the bare hands of the sculptor. I could go on much critique of idolatry, which I think owes a lot to Vico, and regards religion, whether pagan or monotheistic, revealed or popular, as a projection of the human imagination, as he suggests in these scenes of the priest worshiping an object outside himself that turned into a transcendental signifier. I just want to pause for a moment before we get to Poussin on some of the actual figures of the idols that are mentioned in the Bible and that continue to resonate in Christian pronunciations of idolatry. This is the fearsome figure of Baal, who is, in truth, not all that scary. As far as we know, never had human sacrifices or anything like it. He's simply a Semitic version of what the Romans called the genius loci, or the genius of the place. The god of the oasis that indicates the proprietary claims of the nomadic tribe that returns to it every year. So in almost any traditional oasis, you would find a few statues around that indicate the claim to be able to return to this place, to use the water, to camp there for a certain amount of time. There's also the figure known as Dagon, the god of the Philistines, who is lying on the ground in the center of the picture. Above the top is the Ark of the Covenant with its cherubim. The figure of Dagon has just, as you see, been knocked down. And then there's the punishment for idolatry shown in this image by who made a slaughter of the false prophets of Baal in Siena. And here you see the slaughter of the false prophets. Of course, it includes, as it always does, the women and children. Lots of victims associated. Okay, so now I come to the final part of this investigation. We're going to just say one brief thing about Poussin himself as a touchstone in art history. All the art historians here will know that Poussin is like the Shakespeare of Western art history. And he's paradigmatic in the interpretation of it, and paradigmatic for method in art history for a very long time. My colleague, Richard Neer, writing a book on Poussin, and I have been engaged in a dialogue and friendly debate for the last year about these paintings. Neer is trying to spring us loose, spring art history loose, from its fetishism of the text behind the painting. The idea that really all you need to know here is this is the adoration of the golden calf. You can say, yep, got that. Next painting, next slide. And the plague of Ashdod, yes, got that. And that any refinements will be refinements dictated by these subjects and the whole literature that accompanies them. Neer talks about this as an art history dominated by the library. He wants to shift it over to an art history in which the whole sphere of other images plays a much bigger role. And the painter is someone who doesn't just read text and make images out of it, but who recycles images, makes new images, combining, transforming old images. So this is an effort, of course, and it has a lot of people on his side. So it's one of the pieties of art history always to say that. How can we talk about the painting? How can we talk about the image without succumbing to this programmatic reading, which just takes us back to a text? Don't we have something independent to say about this? So rightly says that this problem is writ large with Poussin. It is the most literary of painters. And divided into these two approaches, the museum and the library. Well, ultimately, I want to propose a third alternative to Near's division of the resources of art history into the library and the museum, and that is Poussin in the world. And not just in his world, which is, I think, the familiar terrain of art history, to contextualize. I'm going to argue rather for Poussin in our time, Poussin right now. What does, if we are looking at these paintings in the present, we're looking at slides of them, how does our present moment, which is a moment, as I've suggested, of in which idolatry, iconoclasm, holy war have reared their heads in a way that nobody could have anticipated. So, I mean, one thing that makes an artist classic is that they're continually updated, or being updated for a new time. So what does Poussin mean to us now?